Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Rabbi Weinblatt. I was not able to attend last year's conference because I was actually in Israel. I was sorry to miss it. I was here 2 years ago, and it's really a pleasure and an honor to be back. So as president of the Brandeis Center, I speak regularly to students and faculty who are experiencing campus anti-Semitism. And for those of you who have been asking, what's the situation on campus like today? Here's what I have learned. Jewish students are feeling intense pressure to keep their Jewishness to themselves. They're increasingly finding that extracurricular spaces are hostile to, quote, Zionists, those Jews who believe Israel has a right to exist. So students frequently hide outward signs of their Jewish identity or avoid specific places or activities where they know they're not welcome. As we heard yesterday, not all, but many universities are doing a better job this year than last when it comes to enforcing their time, place, and manner restrictions. The loud, threatening demonstrations are fewer in number and shorter in duration. But just because the campuses are quieter does not mean the anti-Semitism has diminished. It's just less noisy. On US campuses, the shunning, marginalization, and exclusion of Jews and Israelis is becoming normalized. Today, it's not only acceptable to call for the exclusion of Zionists, it's actually acceptable to exclude Zionists. Vilifying, demonizing, and dehumanizing Israelis, Zionists, and Jews by calling them, quote, baby killers, or, quote, colonizing oppressors, or by claiming that they are the ones responsible for, quote, genocide, famine, and ethnic cleansing has become all too common. And it's not just from students. Faculty have frequently supported or even encouraged this conduct. Meanwhile, university administrators stand by and let it happen in the name of free speech and academic freedom. For example, just yesterday on the student panel, we heard one of the students from George Washington University who reported that a student in her dormitory who had baked a cake for her birthday freshman year, right, the other student had baked a cake for the Jewish student, once October 7th happened, that other student stopped talking to the Jewish student solely because the Jewish student was a Zionist. That story, I have to tell you, is not an isolated incident. I'm aware of students who have left their a cappella groups, their sororities, their dance troupes after October 7th because Zionists were not welcome. There was a theater major who's reached out to the Brandeis Center who's been denied a role in a student play because they were a Zionist. Another student lost their position as president of an animation club for the same reason. This is happening on campuses across the country. The other thing you should know is that sometimes it's the friends of the Zionists who are also subjected to the bullying and to the harassment. The report issued just recently by the Task Force on Anti-Semitism at Harvard University described how there was an Israeli graduate student who was bullied, shunned, and excluded solely on the basis of their Israeli and Jewish identity. But the bullying was so relentless that non-Jewish friends of the Israeli reported to the task force that they too had been bullied by students who claimed they could not be friends with anyone who would be friends with a Zionist. If anti-Semitism is society's oldest hatred, why is it seemingly so difficult for universities to effectively address the problem? When other minorities are targeted, university administrators are quick to condemn the harassment, and they usually take prompt steps to address it. So why don't they do that when Jews are the targets? One reason is because most administrators and the general public still do not understand anti-Semitism. Many can recognize Jew hatred when it comes from white supremacists, such as swastikas spray painted on a wall or overt denial of the Holocaust. But often, administrators are unable or unwilling to recognize other forms of anti-Semitism. They do not understand that anti-Semitism shows up differently in every generation. The one constant is that anti-Semitism, no matter the century, that what anti-Semitism does is Jews are always the scapegoat. The conspiracy theories may change, but Jews are always the ones who get blamed for misfortune or equated with evil. Anti-Semites believe the world would be a better place without the Jews. Today, we have a Jewish collective, the Jewish nation state of Israel. And so today, it's not only individual Jews who are scapegoated, it's often the Jewish state that's labeled as the villain. It's often the Jewish state that is labeled as the villain. For example, there are those who accuse Israel of being the world's worst violator of human rights, while being stunningly indifferent to human rights abuses in countries such as North Korea, Iran, Syria, and China. Anti-Semitism has always sought to other the Jew, to treat the Jew as unacceptable company, to deny Jews their place in society. Today, anti-Semitism seeks to do the same to the Jewish collective. It seeks to deny the one and only Jewish homeland its place in the society of nations. Israel is the only country in the world that is told it has no right to exist. That's contemporary anti-Semitism, but most of the world still fails to recognize it as such. A second reason that universities fail to effectively address anti-Semitism is that most university administrators and the general public don't understand Jewish identity. As Zionist rabbis, you instinctively understand the concept of Jewish peoplehood, and you recognize that the Jewish people have a history in the land of Israel dating back to biblical times. You may have different opinions of the current Israeli government's policies, but you appreciate that Jews are indigenous to Judea, and that as a people, Jews have a right to self-determination in some borders of our ancestral homeland. But this concept, that Jewish identity is defined not only by religious belief and religious practice, but also by Jewish peoplehood, as intuitive as it is for you, is foreign to most university administrators, or it certainly was foreign to most of them prior to October 7th, 2023. For decades, school administrators pigeonholed Judaism as just a faith, and Jews solely as members of a religious community. They recognized that Jewish students may need kosher food or Yom Kippur accommodation, but that was all. These administrators did not understand, and many still do not understand, that Jews are also a people with a shared ancestral and ethnic heritage deeply rooted in the land of Israel. As a result, administrators have a blind spot when it comes to understanding contemporary forms of anti-Semitism that target Jews on the basis of their shared ancestral and ethnic identity. They fail to recognize when Jewish students are being bullied and pressured to disavow their ancestral heritage in order to fully engage and be accepted on campus. When universities introduced DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, ostensibly to protect minority groups from bias that targeted those groups on the basis of their racial or ethnic heritage, most university administrators did not see the Jews as a community that might need such protection. And yet today, that is what's happening on campus. For the most part, campus anti-Semitism is not targeting Jews and Israeli students on the basis of their religious belief or their religious practice. It is targeting Jewish and Israeli students on the basis of their shared ethnic and ancestral connection to Israel, the Jewish people's homeland. One of the greatest challenges we have today when it comes to combating anti-Semitism is enabling administrators and the general public to understand and see the difference between a good faith political debate about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict or about Israel's policies on the one hand, and the vilification and demonization of Jews on the other hand. Administrators often mistakenly think that what they are witnessing is a debate about Israel's policies. It's not. At the encampments, for example, no one asks the students their opinion of Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu or a two-state solution before denying them access to the library or the dining hall. They merely excluded those students who were visibly Jewish. What's taking place today on campus is not a speech issue. It's not a debate about ideas. It's harassing and discriminatory conduct. It's the targeting and bullying of Jews on the basis of their Jewishness. This is about unlawful conduct, not about speech. The demonstrations, the encampments, and the BDS campaigns place Jews who believe that Israel has a right to exist on the wrong side of the social, racial justice equation. For years, starting well before October 2023, these campaigns have equated with evil any Jew who defines their identity as part of a people indigenous to the land of Israel, or indigenous to Judea. Former Knesset member Einat Wilf refers to this phenomenon, she calls it the placard strategy. She says you could see the signs on the campus already for years that would contain basically, they could be boiled down to this simple message of the Star of David equals Zionist equals some evil concept. You have your pick, whatever the evil concept is. It could be apartheid, ethnic cleansing, colonialism, famine, genocide, you name it. These concepts were not provided in order to discuss or debate their accuracy, right? Is it really an apartheid? Does it meet the legal definition of genocide? No. They were there, these evil concepts were there simply for the equation, right? The Jew, represented by that Star of David, is a Zionist and therefore evil. It's important to understand that campus anti-Semitism is not about Israel's policies. It's about Israel's right to exist. It's the result of an organized, well-funded campaign to delegitimize and destroy the Jewish state. It's not about 1967 borders, settlements, or even the, quote, occupation, close quote. Those responsible for spearheading this harassment have one goal, and that is to end Israel's existence as the homeland of the Jewish people. If you don't believe me, look at this map. I don't know how many of you can see it. I can show it, send you a link afterwards. This map was distributed by students in justice in Palestine at Tufts University as part of a campaign called the Deadly Exchange Campaign. Shai Davidai actually referred to this campaign yesterday but didn't use its name. It's the campaign that blames Israel and the Jews for police brutality in America, right? It says, why do we have police brutality in America? It's because our police officers from here are being trained in Israel, and that's where they learn the chokeholds and the racial profiling and all that evil stuff. But if you look at this map, Israel does not exist on this map. All of Israel is referred to, I don't know if you can see here, as occupied territory. When people chant, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, this map is what they mean. On campus today, this map has become the litmus test. To be on the right side of racial and social justice, students are pressured to accept this map and to deny Jews the right to self-determination in any borders in the Jews' ancestral homeland. Jewish and Israeli students are also being pressured to erase and deny Jewish peoplehood and Jewish history as the price of admission. Again, this has been going on for years. It began well before October 2023. Take, for example, the Brandeis Center's clients at SUNY New Paltz. In 2021, the Brandeis Center filed a complaint on behalf of 2 students who were expelled from a sexual assault survivor support group at SUNY New Paltz after they posted and shared on their personal Instagram accounts, right, a post that said that the Jews are an ethnic group that come from Israel and that you cannot colonize a place that your ancestors are from. Let me say this again. There were 2 students. One actually created, they were both survivors of sexual assault. One of them created this support group for survivors, and she then posted, she shared, it was a post by Chen Mazig that said, Jews are an ethnic group that come from Israel, and you can't colonize a place your ancestors are from. There was another leader in the group who was Israeli. She shared this same post on her personal account. This had nothing whatsoever to do with the club. It was their personal accounts. But other co-chairs of the club saw that post and said, that's what you think about Palestine? Then you cannot be part of our sexual assault survivor community. And they cut them off. They were leaders in the club. She'd founded the club. They cut them off from the Google Drive, from the club's social media accounts. And then they started this vilification of these two students online, on Yik Yak, anonymous threats, calling on people to go and to target these students purely on the basis of their Israeli, Jewish, Zionist identities. The threats got to be so bad that the students ended up having to leave campus for a semester because the school could not ensure their safety. Today, this erasure of Jewish peoplehood and Jewish history is taught in the classrooms. At Harvard, for example, they're now offering a class this fall that they're calling Palestine 1,000 Years. This class will erase the Jews' 3,000 plus year connection to the Holy Land and describe Jews only as colonizers who first arrived in the 19th century to steal the land from the Palestinians. At UC Berkeley, an English composition course. Okay, this is not a history class, this is not a Middle Eastern studies class, this is an English composition course on Leninism and anarchism, refers in the course description to, quote, the indigenous Palestinians, and, quote, the Israeli occupying force, and, quote, the Hamas revolutionary resistance forces combating settler colonialism, close quote. And at Cornell, there's a class this semester that's being taught called Gaza Indigeneity Resistance, and that class uses as a case study, quote, settler colonialism in Palestine/Israel, with a particular emphasis on what the International Court of Justice, ICJ, has termed a, quote, plausible genocide in Gaza, close quote. Courses like these, which deny Jewish peoplehood and erase Jewish history and vilify Jews, Zionists, and Israelis, are being offered at universities across the country. And this erasure is not limited to college courses. A similar narrative is now being taught in ethnic studies classes in K through 12 schools across the country. So we now have a term for this. It's called erasive anti-Semitism. Erasive anti-Semitism. And it refers to the erasure and denial of Jewish identity, Jewish peoplehood, and Jewish history. Over the years, we've seen efforts to erase and deny Jewish peoplehood and Jewish history, but recently those efforts have become more bold and brazen. Take, for example, this zine, I guess because it's electronic and digital, it's not a magazine, it's a zine. It's called Smash Zionism. And it was circulated last semester by Students for Justice in Palestine at Boston University. And I just want to read to you on the page that's titled, What is Zionism? Right under that title, it says the following, and I quote, we do not accept the term, quote, Jewish people in any form whatsoever. And then it continues and it says, for us, there's only one Jew, like all Jews know, there's only one God, capitalized, and that is a religious Jew. Okay. So now you have it. They are insisting Jews are not a people. They don't have a history in the land of Israel. Jews are only a faith. They're only a religion. Why? Why is that? Why do we now have this determined effort to insist that the Jews are only a religion and not a people? I'll give you two reasons. First is to delegitimize Israel. Right? I was recently speaking with someone who was telling me stories about how years ago, in an earlier position they had, and we're talking about 15 years ago, maybe more, they used to bring over missions to Israel. And on one of those trips, there was a state legislator who very politely, respectfully said, I really don't understand, and I don't want you to take offense when I ask this question, but why is a religion entitled to a state? And if you think about it, the secular rationale or justification for why we are entitled to a Jewish state is because we are a people. We are a people indigenous to the land of Israel. And it's because the Jews are a people indigenous to the land of Israel that we have a right to self-determination in some borders in our ancestral homeland. You might debate the borders. That might be a political debate. But the idea that the Jews are a people entitled to self-determination, that goes to how Jews define what it means to be Jewish. So if you think about it, right, when people say, why is suggesting that Israel has no right to exist, is that a political statement? Or is that targeting me on the basis of my Jewishness? And if you look at the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, or I would encourage you to go back and actually look at the 2010 State Department definition of anti-Semitism. The IHRA definition was issued in 2016. 6 years earlier, the United States was the first time we adopted a definition of anti-Semitism, and it was based on a precursor to the IHRA definition. And the definitions are almost identical. The key difference is that the 2010 definition takes all those examples that are listed in the IHRA definition, and it pulls out the ones that are relative to Israel, and it puts it on a second page under the heading, what is anti-Semitism relative to Israel? I get asked that question all the time. I say, go look at the 2010 State Department definition. And what you'll see is it divides it up, right? What is anti-Semitism relative to Israel? Right? Because what the IHRA definition and the 2010 definition both say is that criticism of Israel similar to that leveled against any other country cannot be considered anti-Semitic. So if you're going to criticize Israel's policies, right, the way people criticize the policies of the US or Canada or France or Britain, right, that's not anti-Semitism. What is anti-Semitism is when you are targeting Jews on the basis of their Jewishness, when you are demonizing, delegitimizing, or applying a double standard to Jews or the Jewish collective, right? And what the 2010 definition does is it divides the examples, the IHRA definition examples, up into those three categories. Some of you may recognize those as Natan Sharansky's 3Ds. So delegitimize Israel is defined there as denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, e.g. by suggesting Israel has no right to exist. In the IHRA definition, it's modified slightly to say denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination by calling Israel a racist endeavor. But in both of those, the key